King of the Hill was a long-lasting show, but compared to its animation domination counterparts, it ended rather early. They are bringing it back for a Hulu revival. Unfortunately, some of the show's mainstays are no longer with us. Rest in peace to Brittany Murphy, Johnny Hardwick, and Tom Petty. While I'm really hoping the revival holds up to the original series, it made me question, how good was the original series? So I rewatched the first season of the show, and here's the good, the bad, and the ugly of King of the Hill Season 1. Before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to our patrons. And if you want to support us, the link is in the description below. Thank you. So let's start off with the ugly. Luckily, there are very few moments that I would put into this section, but it's not without it for sure. So King of the Hill is a cartoon that tries to stay in the realm of reality. It often comes off more like a live-action sitcom, only animated, which means they will depict things that people often go through, for good or bad, and in this case, ugly. They have an episode which depicts Hank, Peggy, and Bobby getting addicted to cigarettes. And they do not pull their punches in showing addiction, to a disturbing level. I don't know what it's like to be addicted to smoking, but when these three are trying to get clean, they come off like they're going cold turkey from a heroin addiction. Again, I don't know anything about smoking addiction, maybe someone can better inform me in the comments, but this depiction was very unnerving. I mean, I guess that's what they were going for, and it definitely worked on me, even though I already don't smoke. But damn, now I'm horrified of it. The other episode I would put into the ugly section is Hank's unmentionable problem. If anyone tells you that King of the Hill is above toilet humor, direct them to this episode. This episode is about Hank not being able to go to the bathroom because of constipation. Hence, most of the jokes are toilet humor. But remember how I said this show was reality based? They take this problem really seriously. To the point Hank almost has colon surgery and would have to live with a colostomy bag. Luckily for him, this doesn't happen, as the emotional payoff of the episode is Hank going to the bathroom. Yeah, this is firmly in the ugly category. Other than these two episodes, there's only a few moments I would consider ugly, like Bobby romancing a mannequin head, and Hank's mistreatment of Luann, which I would consider just ugly for now. Next season will firmly go into the bad section, that's for sure. Speaking of bad, I think it's time to talk about the bad of Season 1. Just like the ugly section, this is a very small category. You have things like Cotton's general misogyny, and slapping women on the butt, and Nancy cheating on Dale with John Redcorn, which is something that always made me hate those two. I mean, they make Dale one of the best characters on the show by far, and having his wife constantly cheat on him is awful. And this will stay in the bad section for the series. But the worst thing about Season 1 is definitely the episode Westy Side Story. This is the episode that introduces series mainstays, the Souphanousinphone family. And everyone is racist to them. I do recognize that a lot of the jokes are making fun of racism, and the ending does have an anti-racist message. But that doesn't change the fact that throughout most of the episode, nearly every character says something racist about Khan and his family. To the point that they think Khan killed his dog and fed them to the neighbors during a barbecue. Then Hank thinks they kidnapped Ladybird to eat. So yeah, this episode does have an anti-racist message, but this is bad. Now that that's over, in a lesser form of bad for Season 1, let's talk about King of the Anthill, where Dale ruins Hank's lawn for petty revenge. The worst part about this episode is what they did to Bobby. Once again, this show is reality based, so when they do something that would never actually happen and makes no sense, it comes off as incredibly stupid. And that is where Bobby comes in. He is essentially mind controlled by a firing a queen. They try to say it's because of her pheromones, but that's ridiculous. and this is by far the dumbest thing to happen in this season. The other part of this episode that I don't like is the resolution between Hank and Dale. Yes, Dale saves Bobby from the fire ants, but Bobby would have never been in that situation if it wasn't for Dale when he released fire ants onto Hank's lawn, a lawn that he takes great pride in, and just dropped a lot of money putting expensive sod in. So Dale did good, yes, but at best it just evens out all the bad he did. So Hank just letting him get away with it, and even calling Dale his best friend, was a poor ending. Now with the bad and ugly out of the way, let's finally talk about the good, which is most of the season. Overall, this is a solid showing for King of the Hill. And even the episodes I talked about earlier, there are still plenty of funny moments in those episodes. This season had beautiful moments, like the ending of The Order of the Straight Arrow. There are sweet endings between characters, like Hank and Luann in Luann's Saga. Then there are great episodes that touch on real-world issues at the time, like in Square Peg, which focused on the neighborhood having issues with the school teaching sex ed, and Peggy being forced to be the one to teach the class. With those being mentioned, let's get to the top 3 episodes of King of the Hill Season 1. Before I start, I'd like to give an honorable mention to the pilot, which just barely didn't make this list. Number 3 is Shins of the Father. This episode introduces Hank's father, Cotton Hill, in non-flashback form, and Cotton is a riot. Is he an offensive jerk that rubs Peggy the wrong way? Yes, absolutely, but he is hilarious at doing it. Rubbing Peggy the wrong way makes him even more likable later in the series, when Peggy becomes an obnoxious dumbass, who basically thinks she's on par with Einstein. Yeah, Peggy gets awful by the end of it. But back to Cotton. He is something else in this episode, which is evident by giving Bobby a loaded shotgun for his birthday, and takes Bobby out to buy hookers, which is actually a conference for female lawyers. I know what you're thinking, greatest grandpa ever. We do see a deeper side of him in this episode, when we learn that he purposely broke down his car just to spend time with his family. A car that he cherishes and constantly keeps properly maintained. There's also an interesting note for him in this episode. He seemed to have been depicted as more of an old school cowboy type of person, but this is something you really don't see in the later seasons. I wonder why they didn't keep this aspect of him. But anyway, this is a solid episode and Cotton Hill is a great character. Number 2 is Hank Gets the Wheelies. This episode is about Hank wanting Bobby to have a hero, and wants to steer Bobby away from the rather obnoxious influence of a prop comic, Celery Head, who caused Bobby to play Hank's guitar with a piece of cheese, and use his golf clubs to hit dog poop, in lame attempts at comedy. This is also where we learn that Hank's personal hero is Willie Nelson, who he apparently often dreams about, and has a fantasy that he'll meet him and become a popular singer himself. So Hank takes Bobby around and talks to him about getting a hero. This leads them to a golf course, which Bobby shows great skill at the sport, and also hits someone with a golf club, which turns out to be Willie Nelson. Hank is starstruck at meeting him, but Willie Nelson is in no condition to meet fans. This causes Hank to become distraught, because meeting his hero went so poorly, leading Bobby to become upset because of how his dad feels. But Bobby decides to fix this problem, and rides his bike far away to Willie Nelson's house. Well, a trailer outside his house, where he finds the man playing a video game, and Bobby helps him out with it. He then apologizes to Willie and talks to him about his dad. This leads to the neighborhood going to Willie Nelson's party, and hanging out with celebrities, where Hank has a deep conversation with Willie about Bobby needing a hero, which Willie stops him, and mentions how Bobby wants to use all of Hank's things, saying that Bobby already has a hero, and it's Hank Hall. Hank Hill. This is a great episode. The only downside with it is, Hank's fandom for Willie Nelson is never mentioned again, as far as I can remember. You'd think if Willie was Hank's hero, he would talk about him more often. But no. Heck, in the later seasons, Hank doesn't really come off like the type of person who would like Willie Nelson. But this could just be a nitpick. This was a really solid outing for the show. And now we get to number 1. And the best episode of King of the Hill Season 1 is Peggy the Boggle Champ. This episode is about Peggy showcasing her great skill at the board game Boggle, which she wins a local competition at the Elks Club, where they say it's a fundraiser to raise bail money for a member of the club, but for some reason it counts as a qualifier for the state Boggle Championship in Dallas, and they give out a large trophy for it, for a fundraiser, for bail money. Anyways, Peggy is allowed to bring a support coach with her to Dallas, which she chooses Hank, who is happy to go because there's a lawnmower expo in Dallas at the same time as the tournament. After they leave for the state championship, there is a hilarious subplot involving Luann and Bobby, where they're being careful trying not to make a mess and get in trouble. But Bobby doesn't use a coaster, and then they go overboard trying to clean it, causing them to accidentally spill a single drop of varnish. And then they go crazy trying to fix that, to the point they bring an entire cleaning crew for the house, which backfires on them, as Hank and Peggy think they're returning to a party, and they get in trouble. But back to the main plot. When Hank and Peggy get to Dallas, they're staying at a really nice hotel, but Hank is weary of the valets taking his car, because he thinks everyone in Dallas is shifty. Before the tournament, Peggy meets the 7-year state Boggle champion, and becomes demoralized in the first day of the tournament, only doing better than the best character of the episode, the Boggle playing chicken. That night in the hotel room, Hank tries to motivate her by yelling at her and calling her a loser. Yeah, this doesn't work. However, Peggy does do better on day 2, substantially better, to the point she makes it to the finals of the tournament, all while Hank secretly went off to the mower show. But while he's there, he isn't enjoying himself. He's only thinking about Peggy and how she's doing. Then at the finals, Peggy is head to head with the woman that demoralized her in the first place. And she looks for Hank for support, but he's gone. During the match, Peggy is struggling. Meanwhile, we see Hank rushing back to the hotel, to the point of not caring about the valets taking his car. We then see Peggy break her pencil, and all seems lost, until Hank shows up with one for her, giving Peggy the confidence to win the tournament, and become state Boggle champion with Hank by her side. And that was the good, the bad, and the ugly of King of the Hill Season 1. If you have different thoughts and feelings about anything I mentioned in this video, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.